Greetings, everyone. My name is Jason R. Levine, also known as Fluency MC, and I am so excited to be back hosting a webinar with the American TESOL Institute. An honor and privilege I've had for many years now. We've got a brand new series we're kicking off in October 2024. So yeah, really happy to see all you guys here live, and also people watching asynchronously. Thanks for joining us as well. Please remember to share the video out. It's a free and open webinar, but it's also part of the American TESOL Institute certification course, which is a really great course I've been supporting for a long time. And yeah, welcome. English teachers who are just getting started, people in training, not yet teachers perhaps, teachers with experience. Welcome to you all, ELTs worldwide. Our first topic in this series is boosting students' speaking skills. Got to start with one of the most important, right? So if you've had the experience, or you soon will have the experience, because you will, of struggling to get your students to speak in the classroom, we're going to look at why that happens and what you can do as a teacher to help students build their speaking skills, unlock their speaking potential, as it was written on the American TESOL Institute blog. I really like that. So I'm from the United States. I live in France now. I live in Paris. I'm at a university in Paris where I teach a couple times a week. In New York, I had international students from all over the world, immigrants also. And what I noticed very early on was that many students came over, whether as students or immigrants, with English sometimes at a pretty good level, but in a more traditional style of learning English. So more like grammar translation, not communicative. So they had the English they thought they needed to then speak in New York, but that wasn't the case. And let's look at why. So I don't know if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. Even if you're not, I think you'll get it pretty quickly, that this is a hierarchy of educational objectives, the cognitive hierarchy. And it's not for second language acquisition specifically, but let's look at it that way. In order to use English, right, to apply English, analyze it, right, you need a base. And that base, if you look at it, recalling facts and basic concepts, really, for a second language acquisition, we could say that it's collocations, it's chunks of language. And I'm going to keep talking about that throughout today. And that's not what people coming into New York that I was referring to a moment ago had usually, right? They had a base of, grammar rules and kind of knowledge of some vocabulary kind of, in pieces. And that was the biggest problem. So I realized early on that it's my job was to try to help them build these lexical chunks, these collocations. So, for example, if you're here live, you can try this, and if you're not, you can try it too. I think that you'll probably say it took a long. She likes listening to, and I know where to. Right. And that's because you've read English enough, you've heard English enough. If you haven't gotten enough English, then you won't know that. But that's not something we learn in the sense of, rules so much. It's something we just get exposure to and repetition with. And that is how our brain acquires language best, in these chunks. So my job, I set out to try to get my students to think about learning English the way to give them target language in lexical chunks, because I knew from the training I got and the success I started to have, that it wasn't about grammar first. It was about collocations first, the lexical approach. But it didn't succeed very much. So I was frustrated, especially on the speaking side, because I didn't see so much improvement in terms of my students becoming more fluent, until one day I realized my problem. I was teaching a class, and it was really an epiphany. So I want to tell you about it, and it connects so directly to what we're talking about today with speaking skills. I said something in the classroom, like this was in New York. Like I always, and a student said Coca-Cola. And I didn't understand what happened. I was also shocked because the student was a Korean woman who almost never spoke in class. And she said it so spontaneously and, like fluently, like what just happened? And then the students were laughing. And I realized, oh, at the time, the slogan for the Coca-Cola family company, family, where do I get that from? Family of companies was always Coca-Cola, that she was seeing and hearing this collocation, always Coca-Cola, created by the company. She was hearing it on the radio. She was on television, seeing it on the bus, that she was getting so much exposure to it, far more exposure than she was getting to English in the classroom. And that's when it hit me. It's about repetition. And that's when I went back and took a closer look at Bloom's taxonomy and that word repeat, that without enough exposure, right, students aren't going to have those lexical chunks that they need to build sentences and to speak or to write. But let's focus on speaking today. So I decided to write a song because we repeat songs, put the collocations into a song. I was even on this program doing the song. I made games too, and I started going to schools and doing games and songs with students full of collocations, much better than worksheets. But at the same time, it was still a struggle to figure out in the classroom what teachers could do, including myself. So certainly, practice with English outside of class is great if it can happen, right? Like the always Coca-Cola, getting enough exposure. But in the classroom, can we give students enough repetitions? No. Can they get enough outside of class? Can we hook them on something the way Coca-Cola hooked them on that collocation? Possibly. But before we go there, what is English practice? Because this word is super important for this webinar and every other one we will talk about. Well, students usually say this, or sometimes we say, you just need to practice more. But look at studying, practicing, and using English. So the students I talked about before who came to New York, whether they're immigrants or international students, if they had kind of good level of English, it was usually because they'd studied the language, right? And then they thought, oh, they can go and use it, right, on the TOEFL in a conversation, this kind of thing. And it didn't work. And that's because they hadn't practiced. So we need to think what practice is. If we think about it in sports, it's immediately clear that the guy on the right is practicing and the team on the left is playing. With music, we don't wonder what the difference is between practice and performance. We see it, we feel it. We could make a long list, and that's something we can do in another webinar. But the most important thing is if you check what practice is, it's repetition, right? Guitar, tennis, dance, you repeat and repeat. And like always, Coca-Cola, with repetition, you can quickly retrieve something. Studying the language doesn't do that for you. So, as I showed you, I make songs, I make games, and that can help with outside of the classroom. And encouraging your students and trying to get them hooked on repetition outside the classroom is so important, and we're going to get to that. But we'll also talk about what you can do in the classroom to encourage repeated exposure to target language so that your students can move into using English. And this is the credo I live by, and what really is behind, the root of everything we're going to be talking about today. Or the root's not the right way, but yeah, the formula that with enough repetition, if it's fun and meaningful, you become more accurate and you are more confident and are able to then produce language more fluently. So I just said those words, meaningful, if it's interesting or fun. It needs to be natural. So we're not talking about repetition like in the old days, audiolingual method of just repeating decontextualized sentences or boring dialogues in a book, right? But we can't make the mistake of thinking, okay, because we don't want to repeat boring things, we can skip the practice. We need to repeat, but it needs to be natural. So keep that in mind as we talk about tips for boosting speaking skills, unlocking your speaking potential. So I just went through a very linguistic side of things, with second language acquisition, with repeated exposure. But of course, without a solid relationship with your students, you and your students, and without your students feeling comfortable, safe, secure, valued in the classroom, nothing's going to work. So, this is a webinar on its own, but I think the most important thing I can say from my experience is if you are a kind of friendly person that makes friends easily and can make people feel kind of comfortable and you're comfortable, then just do what you normally do to get to know your students without thinking so much about lesson plans and activities at first. If you're not that way, you could still be an amazing teacher, right? But you probably need then some kind of activity that kind of gets your students that you're facilitating to get your students to know you and each other in the classroom. And this includes needs assessment. So what are your students' needs and interests, So it's not just about being a friendly person, it's also showing a genuine interest in what they want to learn, what they need to learn, what they think is interesting and fun. So that's first and foremost on the psycholinguistic side of things. And this is something I'm going to mention now, and you'll hear me talk about it throughout today, which is, outside the classroom, they're going to need to get enough more repetition. You cannot provide enough input in class at their level and a little bit above to get them where they need to be. But you can only do what you can do. So you can try to get them interested in things outside of class. We'll come to that soon. But what can you do in the classroom? You can do a lot in that time you have with them, whether it's 1 day a week or 5 days a week, that you are their deliverer of input that they can understand. And this is crucial because out there, often it's too difficult for them. The situations where they'll use different English, they feel uncomfortable. So that you are really mindful of your role in providing input for them. And this is different from teacher talks. And we're going to talk about the difference with that later. And this does not just mean you. This means input you're bringing in. But without enough comprehensible input, they're not going to be able to produce anything, right? So as I said, it's limited what you can do in class. They need to get enough outside of class, but we're going to talk about in the different activities. I'm going to explain soon how this comes into play. So keep that in mind. You know how some teachers feel like they're doing students a service by saying it's okay to make mistakes. I used to do that. But you know what? That's not the best thing to say. It's better than saying, don't make mistakes, which is, obviously outrageous. And I don't think anyone would do that. But it's not just that it's okay to make mistakes. You have to. Can you imagine just thinking it's okay to make a mistake when you're learning a dance, or knowing that you learn from those mistakes? Without the mistakes, you won't learn. So if you're a low-level student, a high-level student, you will plateau with no mistakes. So it's important at every level to try to go reach a little bit so that you make the mistakes, learn from them. This is critical with speaking because there's so many issues. If students are feeling ashamed of making mistakes, so they don't want to speak for this reason, then when if you help them understand that they need to make mistakes and that you want an atmosphere like that, that can help them feel more comfortable. Also, while they're talking, if they're making mistakes and you're correcting and helping each other in a meaningful way from the mistakes, this will motivate them actually more to speak. So it's really, really important, and will feel like, oh, you can see the other people in the class are making mistakes and you're all working together the same way you would if you were on a team in sports or learning to play music as a band, right? So that's what you want. And I feel like the reason it doesn't seem the same, the comparison with music or sports or dance is because for millennia, we've been thinking about learning a language as a subject, right? Not a skill. And now, especially English, right? It's not a subject, it's a skill like dance and sports, etc. A good analogy, I think, is computer science and a computer like I'm using right now. Computer science is more like a subject, right? It can also be practical, but anyway, using a computer every day is how a lot of people want to know English, and not the way you'd learn it as a subject, linguistics or something like this. So obviously, mistakes are part of any skill building. And this is also a huge one. And I didn't do this at first and learned kind of the hard way. So I'm here to help you with it. It makes sense now so easily that I was trying to get students to speak before they really had time to get their thoughts together and write something. And this, of course, can help their writing as well. So it can be where they share what they want to say after they've had time to really think about it, write it, and then make mistakes, and you can correct each other, or you can correct them. Think about where to mark the rhythm, and this is especially important for low-level students, so that then when they're ready, either with a partner or in a group to share, they are more confident, because not because it's perfect, we already said it's okay to make mistakes, but they have something that's more accurate. And remember, accuracy then builds the confidence, so they'll be more likely to speak if they have something that they've written down first. Now, that's not always true, but in many cases, I think it's really important. Marking the rhythm. This is another webinar that I hope to do with you soon, just thinking about pronunciation side. But obviously, if students are worried that the pronunciation is not good, it may hold them back from speaking. And if you help them, especially with difficult sounds, but where the rhythm is, before they then get into a situation with a partner or a group or in front of the class, this, I think, will make a big difference for you. So I mentioned pair and group work, and great thing about this is that if they're in a pair or a group and not in front of the class, and they're feeling okay about making mistakes, and you're coming around to help them individually, they're going to be more likely to speak then in a more formal setting, whether it's a group or it's a presentation or something like this. Especially when you find certain people that work well together in the class. A great thing to do, but I'm going to illustrate it in a moment in an example. Also, just quickly, is starting with an individual, then a pair, putting pairs together, then a group, and then the whole group as a class. And by the time you get to that point, they feel much more comfortable with the target language and are able to speak with more confidence. This is something I said earlier we would talk about again, and here we are. So I hear teachers sometimes saying the reason that students aren't talking enough in class is because the teacher's talking too much. That can be true if a teacher is kind of just, not aware that they're talking about things too much and not letting their students have a chance, answering the questions themselves, maybe just out of nervousness or whatever. But remember what I said earlier, that if, it's also, you have a role, and maybe they're not speaking enough because they're not getting enough input. So if you're controlling that and really mindful of it, it's going to make a big difference. But yeah, certainly it could be that there's too much TTT. So make sure that you keep that to a minimum. And even TTT, like explaining how to do an activity, that's not really the negative TTT, right? It's more just when you're not purposely thinking of the language you're using and the way you're using it that would benefit the students receptive skills to then be able to produce language in the classroom. This is sort of the heart of what I wanted to talk about today, and I'm going to give specific examples of speaking activities. I think this is really pulls everything in we're talking about. Controlled and free practice. They're both important. Let's define what they are in terms of speaking, especially. So a controlled activity is one where there's more structure and the goal is more accuracy. Not that mistakes can't be made. On the contrary, mistakes can be made and corrected, but it's a way that the brain is getting in a positive way, not feeling so, open, feeling like, okay, I'm able to see how this new grammar structure works, how this vocabulary is used, so that I will be able to produce it in a more freer activity. So free practice, less control, less structure, focus is more on fluency, not on the forms themselves. So better to give examples of this than to keep talking about it abstractly. So a more structured, accuracy-focused activity could be, for example, a 2-minute mystery. So I'm going to tell you about this one. I chose 2 accuracy-focused activities, 2 fluency, and 2 mixed. So we're going to do them. And there are, of course, many more. But I chose them because they are great for any level, anything you're talking about, any focus, whether grammar, vocabulary. It could also just be without a focus on specific grammar or vocabulary too, and different ages and interests. So a 2-minute mystery is where you tell a very quick story, and then students have to ask questions to get more information. So it's great practice for questions, forming correct questions. It's minimal listening activities. So if they're going to talk about some important listening activities, but this is really speaking practice. So you talk just enough to tell the story and then answer questions. So here's a 2-minute mystery. Past tense focused. A woman was in a meeting at her company, and during the meeting, she got up, she left the room, she went down the hall to get a drink of water, and then she went back to the meeting and sat down. Then she did the same thing, and you repeat the same thing. Ooh, repetition, practice, repetitive, comprehensible input. Then a third time she got up, she left, she walked, right? So this is the language that with the repetition, students are going to be able to then use. So you repeat that. But the third time that this woman went to get a drink of water, as she finished drinking the water, she looked up and saw in her reflection, because there's a mirror. Sorry, I didn't mention that. A mirror on the wall. She looked up, she saw there was a man behind her, and he was holding a knife. And of course, you can make this more dramatic. I'm going quickly here just to explain the basics. So the woman was scared and she screamed, but then something strange happened. The man and the woman started to laugh. They started laughing. What happened? Now, this could be a fluency-based activity too, if you just said, okay, ask me questions or get with a partner and try to understand what happened. But the way it's accuracy-focused, and it's very cool, is I put up on the board, and you can also do this on a piece of paper that you hand out, questions, structures they can use. I say only yes or no questions at first. So past tense, did the man, did the woman, did they, did it, right? Was the man, was the woman, were they, was it, right? And I put that up there. And then I'm expecting some mistakes. Now, not with the did and the was necessarily, but after that, right? So you're going to get some did she was, and, was she take, right? Did she went, right? So you can address all of those mistakes and have them correct themselves and each other, and then answer the question. And that works really well. And then you can open it up to WH questions, right? Why, did, when, right? So all past, which is really important. So it's speaking practice in a very controlled way. And do you know what happened? Can you imagine? You can give more information or get a student who starts to get closer with the information they get. The woman, she wasn't thirsty. She had a little problem. The man wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to scare her. That's right. Her little problem was she had the hiccups. There are more 2-minute mysteries. I have a ton of them. I'm going to give you my email at the end. You're more than welcome to email me if you're curious about more 2-minute mysteries and the procedure for using them. Dictogloss, one of the best activities there is in second language learning, I believe, which is, it's similar to a dictation, but it's not a dictation. I'll explain. I did one of these this week with a group of low-level university students. So I read something. I said, very naturally, I've got something on my phone I saw in the news. Probably some of you saw this. Elon Musk's SpaceX accomplished something incredible on Sunday, and this was on Monday this week. Did you hear about that? And a couple people, right? A couple people say, but more people not afraid to speak, and people, I said very low, so they're just saying, something about rocket landing, and they're not really forming the past tense. The rocket came down, and the chopstick arms caught the rocket booster, right? So I said, oh, you know about that a little bit. You don't know? Okay. I read the beginning of an article. So I like to do dictoglosses with articles, but you can use anything, you'll see once I start explaining it. Just 3 sentences about what happened. And then I read it again. And I read it again. I didn't explain why. I just said, I'm going to read it again. And then I said, I'm going to read it again, and you can take notes. Please take notes. Not writing everything I say, but just keywords. Because, I told them, after that, I want you and a partner to try to reconstruct what I said. So, and this is the essence of a dictogloss. It doesn't need to, it can't be, should not be every word. It's not a dictation, but try to incorporate some of the words you think are important and then write your own sentences, right? 1 or 2 sentences. So I did that again. If they want more repetitions, you give it to them, right? That's what's great about dictation stuff. If they look at it as more like a game, like trying to get it all. But again, this is not a perfect dictation. This is more communicative, because then they get together, they try to do it as best they can, and I come around and correct them. Remember that technique I said before, like write it first, then speak. So I go around the room, correct it. Once they have something they like, they can share it. Either a pair gets with another pair, and they form bigger and bigger groups, then in front of the class. And then, what's your opinion about what happened? Then they're much more able in their pairs and groups to start talking about what happened. You can show them the article. They can look at the full article, show them a video of what happened, which I did in this case. And that can be a great way to build a base for more fluency activities after. Dictoglosses are great. You can use them to focus on specific grammar structures, on specific pronunciation you want them to practice. But yeah, it leads very well into more free conversations. Fluency-focused activities. So one would be just a conversation about a topic, but hopefully after they've already gotten enough with the target language to do that. So what is a fluency-focused activity from the beginning? I love the news article discussion activity. You cut up articles. I have tons of them by topic. You can bring them in like I did in an engineering classroom, where I brought in articles about artificial intelligence, lots of different ones. Everybody comes up, takes an article. You can either have them choose one that looks good or just randomly. Both ways are kind of cool. They sit down. I say, read your article, very short, or just the beginning of an article. Mine are from the New York Times and the Financial Times. And then I'll come around if you have questions about vocabulary. So you can go around. You don't tell them what's going to happen yet. Just try to understand basically what's happening in your article. And then I say, okay, when you're ready, you're going to get up. Someone else is going to get up, and you're going to meet, like do standing up, and you're going to explain, kind of summarize your article to the other person, and then the other person will do the same. Okay, so that's not easy at first without any help. This is just a fluency-focused activity. I help with vocabulary, but that's it. And but then here's the great thing about this, and what makes this such a great fluency activity, is that after they've done it with one person, you tell them, okay, switch and go to another person. So in my class of 20 people, That meant that at the end, each student had talked about their article 19 times. And as you may already be thinking, each time got a little easier. Each time they were a little more accurate and more fluent because they're self-correcting, hearing their mistakes, right? So there is accuracy going on, but they're not focusing on it that way. They're just thinking about being able to communicate it fluently, and they get more and more fluent. And guess what? At the end, if you have them in a whole class again, which I do, and I say, "Who can you tell me about your article?" Right? Because I haven't heard about any of them, even though I've kind of been listening, monitoring them. They can just say it so beautifully because they've said. And if you say, "Tell me about another person's article," right? That's a little harder because they only heard it once. But that's also something you can do, having them share what they thought was a good article somebody had, or not so interesting, or whatever. So yeah, great activity. I strongly recommend that. Debate questions doesn't have to be for a debate always. So you can make little cards, cut up little pieces of paper. You can have them any level, any age, right? Like I said earlier, how about, dogs are better than cats? Could be one, all the way up to, humanoid robots are, detrimental to society or something like this. And it can be fluency focused if you just give them and say, okay, discuss, right? Don't worry about how you do it. Now, of course, you could have an accuracy focused activity that leads up to this. So it's fluency focused in the sense that you are just saying, here's the topic, go. But you could, of course, be practicing language to express opinions, to agree and disagree, or you could use it as a jump off point to then go into language, functional language, if they realize, oh, it was a little difficult because I didn't know how to express my opinion or agree or disagree. So most activities, I recommend something accuracy focused and fluency focused. We're going to look at British Council on their many websites, of course, with great things. I chose this one not randomly because I use it very often. I think it's great. It does a great job, but there are others that I could have chosen as well. And bamboozle games. So let's start with British Council listenings. So if you go to British Council, you will see that you can look at skills. So we're in listening, and this is a B1 listening. And I just took screenshots, for you to see it. So you listen to a talk. I love the idea. The preparation task has vocabulary that's really simple. Everybody feels confident. It's just matching words. It's not, hey, do you know this vocabulary or not? Often, if they weren't sure about it, it's such an easy activity that they'll feel confident, they'll know it. So this is their first introduction to the vocabulary. And the other end, let's look at the other end of this activity is discussion. And that's why I chose it, especially for talking about speaking, because the end result, can you imagine asking your students, how diverse is your workplace? How can diversity benefit your team? Or how diverse is your university? How does diversity? This is the whole problem, right? Going back to my international students in New York, coming over, sitting down in the classroom, and we say, okay, tell us about your culture. What do you think of gun control? Or how about diversity, right? But they don't have the language up here to use it. Can you give them enough of that language through comprehensible input in your classroom? Probably not. They're going to need to get some out of class, and we're going to get to that momentarily. But you can do things in the classroom to get them to the point where they're able to have opinions, be able to express their opinions the way they will in this activity. So the preparation task exposes them to the vocabulary that's in the listening. What I do is I have them then look, not the transcript, that's at the end, look at the first task. Of course, they can't do it. Let's say it's true, false. They haven't heard it yet, but to look at it first to help them see what they're going to listen to. Then they listen. Either they don't, cover their eyes, or they look at the task. I leave it there. Some people like to look at it while they listen. Some people feel distracted and they prefer to just focus on listening. And they know that if this is not a test and that we're going to respond together to the task. So I like to do this as a group, like we vote. Is it true? Is it false? We listen once, we try. If we do the task 100%, great. Usually no, oh, we got 60% right. Let's listen again and try to find the correct answer the second time. So the repetition with a reason to repeat. Then task 2, if they got 100%, then we go right to task 2. If they didn't, we repeat. We go to task 2. We don't get that one complete. Let's listen again, right? And each time we listen, just like each time they're talking about their article, right? It gets easier and easier. They're hearing the target language again and again, so that when you get to the discussion, right? If you put them in partners in groups, without thinking, they're going to use some of that target language. So it's not always Coca-Cola kind of level, but right, if there's language in there about, the diverse workplace, sorry, I didn't put the language here, and I don't remember this one exactly, but let's say they're talking about, learning from different experiences from different cultures. They might say, you can learn from different experiences in different cultures, right? It pops out because they heard it 4 times. So this is the comprehensible input idea, the idea of repetition and practice, that if you're expecting your students to talk, but they haven't had enough of the input of the target language, then it's not because they're shy, right, necessarily, or some other reason. It's because they don't have the language they need. They're not at that point where they're ready to produce it. So an activity like this, going from more controlled to freer practice, can be really great. Bamboozle games. I want to go and show you on the internet how you can use a bamboozle game. Bamboozle's free, and if you join, you can play my games. Just look for me, Jason Levine, Fluent CMC. It's true that if you have the paid if you pay for it, I'm forgetting the word for that. I'll get the membership, the subscription, then there are more features. You can do more things, but you do have access to all the games that are public from me and everybody else that makes games. Okay, so when you open one of the games, it opens like this, World Cultures. I'm going to show you this one today. I'll show you 2, actually. I'll show you one, explain some things, and then show you another one. So this one is obviously a little higher level. If you look at the questions, you couldn't use this with a very low level group. You can see a sort of a slideshow of it, so they can see questions. And there are more features, but instead of showing you the features, I'm just going to start a game. I'm not going to explain how the games are set up as much as I'm going to show you what you can do once you're in. So let's say we have 4 teams. We have 16 questions. You can have themes. So let's choose a theme. How about jobs? And I'll show you what that means. And what I'm showing you now, it's this platform, but you can do this with other platforms, with Kahoot. You can make your own games. So it is a particular style of game, but I'll show you what you can do that you can apply to other types of games and how great it is at controlled and fluency practice at the same time. So team 1 is going to choose a job. Team 1 is going to choose veterinarian. The haka is a traditional indigenous dance performed in what country? So this is what I do, for example. And while I'm talking, try to notice what is accuracy focused and what is fluency focused here. So what I do is I say, okay, team 1, they know a rule. If you can guess the answer before I show you the choices, you get double the points. So they start talking about this. Do we know the answer? We try to keep it in English. Now, if you have international students, it works great because they have to use English together. And that's the fluency part. If they're all share the same first language, like my students, French, then you have to sort of get them in the spirit of, this is something, it's an English game, right? You're speaking English. So they're speaking about what they're going to do. They guess. And when they guess, they need to make a complete sentence. So let's say, okay, we think haka is a traditional indigenous dance performed in New Zealand. And I say, okay, perform or performed? Okay. And haka or the haka? Do it again. The haka is right. Same with pronunciation. Is an indigenous, indigenous. Okay, try again. Got the repetition in there. I show them the answers. Oh, New Zealand's there. Do you still want it? Yes. They don't have to repeat the sentence again. You give it to them, they get double the points. Okay, another one. How about the journalist? In Egypt, you've been invited to a meal at a family home. Towards the end of the meal, you are very full. Your hostess offers you more food. What should you do? So the team decides to answer. Again, they have to incorporate their answer into the sentence, right? So there's a discussion about grammar and how it works, and then pronunciation, right? So that's the accuracy focused. But then I'm not explaining other rules that if you want, I can explain if you email me, or I'll do a whole thing on Bamboozle at some point. You can get them to negotiate, for example, with each other. Like another team wants to help. That's all in English, and that's fluency. So there's this focus on grammatical accuracy, on pronunciation, on vocabulary. Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. Oh no. 0 points. And they're also power-ups. Let's see if we can find one. I'll just to show you. Let's get a power-up. Oh, not seeing the power. Let's try another game. So I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, but I think you're getting the basic idea here. Let me show you a super easy game, which I probably should have done first. It would have been simpler. But yeah, having them answer in a complete sentence is always the rule for any of these games. So let's get an easier one. In, on, at. I think we can find it that way. We can't. How about preposition? Preposition. Here's my in, on, or at game. Good. So we're going to play this. Again, think about how you can do other games. Imagine you have, let's say, 6 teams and 36 questions, and the theme is going to be space. And let's go. So I'll show you every answer is in, on, or at. Team 1 is going to choose the solar system. Ooh, in, on, or that for 20 points. So for this one, I'd say, okay, just give me the prepositions. Don't read it yet. They give me the prepositions and we check. Whatever happens, they get partial credit for some. I have them read the sentence. So again, here, the accuracy is not trying to make the sentence, it's with the prepositions, but then the pronunciation when they speak. So they had a barbecue, if they say they had a barbecue, and maybe they had a barbecue in their backyard, right? So lots of things you can do. I'm showing you this, as I said, not just because of Bamboozle, although you can use my games, but other games where you're focusing on accuracy in grammar and pronunciation, but also they're able to talk and have fun, and you can make up rules where they can focus on their fluency. Last but definitely not least, this is back to where we were at the beginning. Many teachers say, well, look, if I only have my students for 3 hours a week, and you're saying that in the classroom, communicative activities are the most important, not repetition, but you're also saying repetition, meaningful practice, getting lots of exposures is compulsory, that they're not going to be able to speak in the classroom really with confidence if they don't have enough English up here. What can I do? And I'd say, well, you're right. You can have the best lesson in the world. You can have the best book in the world. You can be the best teacher in the world. But they need to have enough repetitive exposure to target language. So what do? Tell them, go out and speak, go out and practice English, go out and listen to songs, go out and do this. It's like telling someone, go to the gym, you feel like, okay, I know I need to do it, but I'm not going to do it. That's why I have this word hooked here. Can you get them hooked, or can you try? Can you help them indirectly to engage in activities where they're getting repetition. So always Coca-Cola. That student had that from how many times she'd heard and seen it in a relaxed way. Was that meaningful practice? Not exactly. That is not language that she's necessarily going to need in the classroom. So what can students do? Well, can they get hooked on games, videos, and songs? Yes, but like I said, not if you are telling them to do it. So one thing you can do is, and we'll see how this relates to speaking practice. Let me give you an example. You show them part of a video that's super funny and kind of going viral in English. You play them part of a song and they see the lyrics, but not the whole song. And then you give them some kind of assignment, or not even an assignment, maybe, hey, if you want to check this out, check it out, because tomorrow I want to do a little more with it. They're more likely to go and do that little activity with the song, or do that activity with the funny video, and come back to class, and then you do a little more. So that's one way. Another is, recognizing that most of the time when students get hooked on repetitive activities, like listening to the same songs, watching the same videos, it's not because of you, right? It's like, for example, I know a student who's, got addicted to a game because of she was at her friend's house and her friend's cousin introduced her to the game, and you need English in the game. And then she wanted to do better in the game. So she started watching gamer videos, tutorials, and repeating them again and again to get better at the game. So intrinsic motivation, that's the key, but you can't just get someone to be intrinsically motivated, but you can do certain things. Give me a moment, let me finish the story. So this student, as a result of watching these videos over and over again, without trying, got so much better at English that she started watching series, started listening to music. It's like a gateway drug. This is the best thing, because then she came to class and it didn't matter if the book wasn't interesting or the lesson wasn't interesting. She was so ready to do anything in English. So that's where I think we see, and I think maybe you've met students like this, or if you're starting to teach, you will meet students like this, but there'll be a fraction of the students you have probably. How can we get more students to have that experience? So what can you do? I mentioned one thing in the classroom, kind of show them something that you think might get them hooked, possibly give them some little activity to do with a song to come back into class, or with a video to come back into class. But you can also, look at opportunities to do things that are fun with English at your school. You could start like a book club. You could start like a movie club. You could start some kind of activity where you, because you only have them for a certain amount of time. An English club, that's, you don't have the same kind of pressures maybe with your syllabus and tests they have to take. And that's where you can do more of trying to do activities that might get them hooked. And especially knowing their interests, what they like to do, they're more likely with your suggestions, do things outside of class with English. But in the end, the reality is that even if you have great efforts as a teacher, it's limited. So if you see a situation where students are kind of into something, into watching a video, you can exploit that as much as you can. Before we go today, do you know this expression, practice makes? If you said perfect, I understand. Some of you may say progress now, because that's becoming a thing. I'm glad. I like practice makes perfect in the sense that if it makes you feel more confident because of the accuracy, like we said before, but not if it stresses you out, like no mistakes, right? So progress is great, but I've got something better, I think. I would argue this one's the best, right? Right? Always Coca-Cola was permanently in my students' minds. So if they get repetitive exposures with chunks of language and it's permanent, they'll be able to access them and speak English much more often in the classroom. Before we go, guys, I want to, before we go, guys, just a little taste of what I do as Fluency MC. You'll learn without looking when you stop feeling stressed. Having fun when you learn is when you learn the best. Another one, English learners everywhere, don't ever forget. The more you practice, the better you get. The better you get, the further you go. Just relax, repeat, remember, and you find your flow. And the most important, what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. Enormous thanks to all of you who attended live and those of you who are watching asynchronously. As I said earlier, what a pleasure it is to be back as the host of American TESOL Institute webinars. Thank you so much. If you are welcome, you are encouraged to contact me. I love staying in touch with American TESOL Institute teachers, so ATI teachers, wherever stage you are in with the program. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to send a PDF of this presentation. So please email me if you want that, or if you have questions about things I said today and want to follow up. You can also, if you see this posted on the website or on YouTube, etc., comment there. But if you don't see me answering your question, of course, you can email me anytime. And one more thing, guys, do you know how to play Uno? And your students? I think so. If you know how to play Uno, you can play Fluno. So I have a game to practice, and it's very accuracy focused. Again, with the idea that then students will get input and be able to have more fluent practice. So it's just playing against the computer, but with irregular verbs in easy, natural English sentences. If you're curious about this, as a teacher, you might also like to the fact that there's a quiz the students can take, a PDF, they can print it, they can try it, play the game, and the idea is without learning when you're not looking, they're able to remember more irregular verbs. Once again, thank you guys. Thank you so much. And see you soon. See you next time for the next American TESOL Institute webinar with yours truly, Fluency MC. Have a great day, everybody. Peace, respect. Bye-bye.